We can be.
We must be the first generation
to end extreme poverty.
The generation
Most determined
to fight injustice
and inequalities.
The generation that saves the planet from climate change.
And this is how it will get done. The global goals.
a 15-year plan
For everyone, everywhere.
with no one left behind.
We will live in a world
Where nobody
anywhere lives in extreme poverty.
Where no one
goes hungry.
Where no one
wakes in the morning
asking if there will be food today.
We will live in a world
where no child has to die of
Diseases we know how to cure.
And where proper health care
is a lifelong right for us all.
We will live in a world
where everyone
goes to school.
and education gives us the knowledge
and skills
for a fulfilling life.
We will live in a world where all girls and all women have equal opportunities to thrive
And be powerful and safe.
We cannot succeed if half the world is held back.
we will live in a world
Where all people can get clean water.
and proper toilets
At home,
At school.
and at work.
We will live in a world where there is sustainable energy for everyone.
Heat, light,
and power for the whole planet.
Without destroying the planet.
We will live in a world where economies prosper.
And new wealth.
Lead to decent jobs.
for everyone.
And we will live in a world where our industry,
our infrastructure and our
Best innovations.
Are not just used to make money, but to make all our lives better.
We will live in a world
Where prejudices and extremes of inequality
Are defeated.
Inside our countries,
And between different countries.
where people live in cities and communities
That are safe, progressive,
And support everyone who lives there.
where we replace
What we consume.
Planet where we put back what we take out of the earth.
We live in a world that is decisively rolling back the threat of climate
change.
where we restore and protect the life in our oceans and seas.
will restore
and protect
life on land.
The forests.
animals, the earth itself.
With peace between and inside countries.
Where all governments are open.
And answer to us for what they do at home and abroad.
And the justice rules.
With everyone equal before the law.
Where all countries and we their people.
Work together
Partnerships of all kinds.
to make these global goals a reality.
These are the United Nations global goals.
For sustainable development.
Let's get to work.
Every day, peacekeepers help bring peace and stability to war-torn societies around the world.
I invest in peace by supporting mine action in Cyprus.
I invest in peacekeeping by saving people's lives.
I invest in peace by protecting children in armed conflict.
I invest in peace by facilitating dialogue in between different ethnic communities towards a reconciliation.
By making sure that UN gets to the places where no one else can go, as well as conducting patrols.
On the International Day of United Nations Peacekeepers, we pay tribute to the more than 3,500 peacekeepers who have given their lives in the service of peace since 1948. Their sacrifice only strengthens our commitment to ensuring that United Nations peacekeepers continue protecting civilians in harm's way, promoting human rights and the rule of law, removing landmines, advancing negotiations, and securing a better future in the places they are deployed. Now, more than ever, it's essential that we continue investing in peace around the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning again. And it's my great pleasure in a moment to welcome and invite our Foreign Minister, the Honourable Julie Bishop, to give our keynote address for the conference. At the outset, Minister, I just want to say that we so appreciate you coming here today to do this, and I know that you forwent the opportunity to get home before going to the GA in New York, and so we really do appreciate this. And I think that I speak for all Australians, if anyone ever can, to say that whilst there is a lot of political angst in Australia, at the moment. I haven't ever heard anyone say that they didn't think our Foreign Minister was doing a great job. And it's nice to know that you're at the helm. The two short videos that we just saw, one on the SDGs and the other from our new Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, were deliberate to show the linkage between peace and security and peace operations and the SDGs, because SDG 16 is all really about that. It's going to help bring that together. And this was one of the key things that was missing from the Millennium Development Goals. Because obviously, unless you have SDG 16 working, then we won't have that sustainable peace that we really want. And we did a conference the other day, a round table on SDG 16, and hopefully we'll be able to include some of that work in the publication that comes out from this conference. I just very quickly want to reflect on something that Dr. David Horner said about the golden age of peacekeeping. In 2003, I think it was, after I'd retired from the military, I was in Melbourne. I was running on a visit. I was running an NGO by that stage in Sydney, Austcare, and my driver happened to be, the taxi driver happened to be from Somalia. And I said to him, "Oh, where do you come from?" And he said, "Baidoa." And I said, "Oh, didn't Australians go to Baidoa, you know, some sort of peacekeeping mission?" Not letting on that I knew anything about it. And he said, "Yes, that's why I'm in Australia." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "The Australian battalion gave us such great security. They even patrolled at night time and kept us secure. So when they left and handed over to another battalion, that didn't happen. And so my father said, 'We're going to Australia.' And after spending time in a refugee camp, they actually arrived in Australia. The UNAA, as you'll see from our sponsors at the bottom, the UNAA has a very close relationship with the Australian government. And in fact, this conference wouldn't have happened without the sponsorship of DFAT, Defence and the AFP. And we're very indebted. This doesn't mean that we go out preaching everything they say. We have some robust discussions. But it is actually, I think, a demonstration of true democracy when NGOs such as ours and the government can work very collegiately together on many issues and honestly say where we don't agree on issues. And for me in UNAA, as the fairly new president, only about a year, I have to say I really, really appreciate the close relationship, Minister, with DFAT, because it is outstanding and we work very closely together. Now, Australia has provided some wonderful force commanders and some wonderful police commissioners. We have wonderful people in the United Nations at various levels. We even have a USG in the Secretariat at the moment, which is wonderful. But where the rubber hits the road in the field, we've never provided a special representative of the Secretary-General. So just like hopefully we'll get onto the Human Rights Council if our campaign is successful, hopefully one day we'll have a special representative of the Secretary-General as well. Now, before asking the Minister to come up, I'm compelled to just read a short little part of a speech. Earlier this year, I was fortunate enough to be in Brisbane when the Queensland division of UNAA held their annual march and gathering on Peacekeepers Day. And one young lady who I hadn't previously met, Louisa Ryan, was home on maternity leave from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And she gave this most moving speech that took me quite unawares. So the other day I contacted Louisa, who couldn't be here because she's busily writing her PhD on DRC. and said, "Can I quote some of what you said?" And she gave me her permission. I want to just read this out because I think it says a lot about what happens in the field and about the people who work in the United Nations. So after talking about MONUSCO, which is the mission, and all the problems and everything else there, she asks the question, so what does all this teach us? Well, that the solution to complex conflicts is political. You can have the best guns in the world, but you can't force people to the peace table, especially if continuing conflict is in their interest, or even if they just don't care enough about the conflict to act. MONUSCO recognises that the solution cannot just be military. The DRC has long been a UN PK innovation lab, and the civilian sections have introduced wonderful protection mechanisms such as Community Alert Network, Community Liaison Assistance, and Civilian Military Joint Protection Teams. These were first tried in the DRC and have now spread to other missions across the world as peacekeeping best practice. Protection of civilians is front and centre for us. But there is only so much an international third party can do. We can't force a government to hold elections. We can't force them to pay their security forces so that they don't steal from the very people they're supposed to protect. We can't force them to make peace. Many people criticise the UN for many things. They have a point. We are expensive. MONUSCO costs over $1 billion US per year. But the Congo is vast. It has no roads. And even that sum is a drop in the ocean compared to military action in Iraq or Afghanistan. We expect the UN to be all things and to do so much with so little. A minority of UN peacekeepers commit horrific acts of abuse. There is no excuse for this, and we need to do better. But critics of the UN forget that the UN is us. The people who make the decisions and the rules are our governments. If we want peacekeeping to be better, we need to put it on our domestic agenda. Although this reflection has been pretty bleak so far, she's talking about the DRC, holding my sky blue passport has been the proudest moment of my professional life. UN staff are my people. My heart broke after Haiti. I was sick after the deaths in Afghanistan. Yes, there are some useless UN staff who seem to be impossible to fire. But for every one resting on their gilded UN salary laurels, there are 5 more who don't leave the office till 10 p.m. For every one who has unbecoming conduct, there are 10 more who spend their free time doing charity work. For every one who spends all their time at work organising their next R&R, there are 20 who consider the betterment of the lives of the Congolese their personal mission and spend every waking moment trying to figure out a better way to help. Some even die trying. And then she concluded her speech some minutes later with these words. These are strange tensions in a strange but enormously rewarding life. There are many drawbacks to peacekeeping, political, practical and personal. I'm currently on maternity leave and I'm not sure if I'll go back. Kinshasa is a family duty station now, but I'm not sure it should be, especially with the oft postponed elections coming up. The thought of being stuck at work on one side of town while my daughter at the other, if riots break out, is horrifying to me. But I'm lucky because I have the choice not to put us in that situation. A Congolese mother couldn't say the same. Whether or not I go back to Congo or perhaps somewhere else, I am proud to serve in a United Nations peacekeeping mission. I hope my daughter will be proud of me too. We may have our faults, but who knows how many more lives would have been lost if we weren't there. Even if I don't go back right now, you will absolutely see me back at my desk in 18 years' time when my daughter goes off to uni. It's where I feel I belong. I was so motivated by that. And that replicates, for me, the many people in the field I've had the pleasure of dealing with. Minister, I invite you to give us your keynote address.
Thank you, Michael. That was a very moving tribute. I also thank you for your very kind words, and I acknowledge the work that you do as National President of UNAA. Dr. Brenda Nelson, my dear friend who's looking after me with glasses of water, the dreaded Canberra lurgy. And I want to acknowledge Gary Quinlan, the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and His Excellency Dr. Marty Natalegawa, the former Foreign Minister of Indonesia and a very valued counterpart of mine during his term. Ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This morning, I paid tribute to the United Nations Association of Australia for its leadership in Australia's debate on international affairs and in connecting the very many Australians who take an active interest in the United Nations. This year, we commemorate the 70th anniversary of our engagement in UN peacekeeping. On the 14th of September 1947, Australia was the first country to deploy military observers to the Dutch East Indies as part of a United Nations Consular Commission, and I acknowledge the presence of a fellow West Australian, Charles Eaton, the son of Charles Sr., who headed that commission. These Australian peacekeeping pioneers monitored and reported on the ceasefire between the Dutch and Indonesian nationalists. Although hostilities resumed briefly in late 1948, the combatants eventually signed a United Nations mediated agreement on the 2nd of November 1949, which led to Indonesia achieving de jure independence from the Netherlands on the 27th of December 1949. Almost 7 decades later, Indonesia has become a major United Nations peacekeeping contributor in its own right and one of Australia's most important friends and partners in the region. Peacekeeping is one of the approaches available to the United Nations to assist member states in transitioning away from conflict toward peace and the rebuilding of institutions that can provide security and effective governance, economic development and social progress. In this sense, peacekeeping fulfills the core mandate of the UN Charter to discourage aggression, settle disputes without resorting to coercion or the use of force, and to achieve enduring peace and bring an end to war. Since 1948, the Security Council has authorised 71 peace operations to restore stability around the world. There are 15 underway today across 4 continents. In 2016, the United Nations Security Council adopted 77 resolutions, many directing peacekeeping operations. Thus far, in 2017, it has adopted 37. Tragically, in that time, 4 vetoes have stymied the United Nations Security Council's efforts to respond to the terrible conflict in Syria. Yet the Council continues to drive peacekeeping in many places and, Michael, does it cost effectively. Last financial year, the UN's total peacekeeping budget was under $8 billion US. That's less than 0.5% of global military expenditure. The United Nations has repeatedly demonstrated the value of peacekeeping missions. 54 have completed their mandate and closed. While peacekeepers can't be expected to solve all of a country's problems, and some peacekeeping missions have had difficulties fulfilling their mandates, the world would be a far more dangerous and brutal place without them. Peacekeepers provide a measure of stability that makes it easier for a country to return to political dialogue. They assist in the disarmament, demobilisation and reintegration of ex-combatants. They train police in restoring the rule of law. They provide logistical support that enables elections to be held. They can also play a role in the release of child soldiers. In fact, over 115,000 child soldiers have been released from serving military and rebel leaders as a result of broader UN efforts towards this end. Australia has played an invaluable role in peacekeeping efforts, having contributed troops and police in 62 peace and security operations, including 21 UN peacekeeping missions. From the Middle East and Africa to Asia and the Pacific, we have a proud history of peacekeeping, and we honour those who have served and are currently serving. I congratulate the Australian Peacekeepers Memorial Project on such an impressive and permanent tribute that you have created in this memorial precinct. And I wish I could have been there yesterday. However, the Chief Government Whip decided that the numbers were too close in the House at that time. But well done. Few know better than our military, police and civilians who have served as peacekeepers the difficulty of United Nations peacekeeping operations and the terrible human price paid when national leaders and the international system fall short. In the midst of these painful limits and frustrations, many Australian peacekeepers serving with the United Nations have shown initiative and courage and selflessness worthy of the best Australian tradition. At times, with little to draw on other than their wits and training and perhaps a medical kit, they have brought order to chaos, saved lives and rekindled hope. Australia meets our commitments to the UN peacekeeping budget in full and on time as the 11th largest financial contributor. It's also gratifying to see that many countries that we've assisted are now assisting others. And as I earlier acknowledged Indonesia, which is now ranked 11th amongst troop contributors, I also acknowledge Cambodia and Timor-Leste for their UN peacekeeping contributions. We value our peacekeeping partnerships with our neighbours, and we can't rule out the possibility that we might need to draw on them in the future. We've had 9 UN peacekeeping missions in Asia and the Pacific over the years, having just concluded the Australian-led Regional Assistance Mission in Solomon Islands. Ramsey concluded in June this year, after 14 years. The Royal Solomon Islands Police Force is now deploying police as UN peacekeepers, and its first contingent was deployed in August of 2016 to Darfur, Sudan. Australia trains around 250 international peacekeepers each year, and we're currently helping Vietnam prepare for its anticipated peacekeeping mission to South Sudan in 2018. Through our Defence Cooperation Program, Australia is providing specialist English training to Vietnam, along with equipment valued at about $400,000. Last month, Australia offered to provide strategic airlift to assist Vietnam to deploy its military hospital to South Sudan. In addition to funding, training personnel and logistics, Australia provides policy leadership and development in areas where we have expertise to make the United Nations more capable and efficient. We've gained valuable operational experience in our region during our missions in Timor-Leste, the autonomous region of Bougainville and Solomon Islands. We've worked hard to apply the lessons we've learned through United Nations resolutions, and we've helped drive 3 important reforms now being integrated into United Nations practice. The first of these changes was to focus United Nations efforts from conflict prevention through to recovery and beyond on sustaining peace. As we learned in our 14-year, $2.8 billion commitment leading Ramsey, building peace and preventing conflict requires sustained effort. 90% of civil wars in the years of the 2000s occurred in countries that had already experienced civil war in the previous 30 years. The number of civil conflicts taking place around the world tripled between 2007 and 2014. We must get better at making peace last. In April last year with Angola, we co-chaired negotiations on a resolution adopted by both the United Nations Security Council and the General Assembly, in which the United Nations committed to integrating its efforts around the objective of sustaining peace. We support the UN's efforts to help countries emerging from conflict, including in our region, through the UN Peacebuilding Fund and the UN Department of Political Affairs. Now, the second lesson we took to the United Nations concerned the particular contribution that police can bring to peacebuilding. The Australian Defence Force was an important presence in the first phase of Ramsay's deployment, although Ramsay was a civilian-led integrated security and development mission. Its longest-running component was, in fact, operational and capacity-building support to the Royal Solomon Islands Police Force. So for the last 4 years of its existence, from 2013 onwards, Ramsay was solely a policing mission. When police keep the peace, they can build the rule of law from day one. Rule of law is crucial to establishing a sustainable peace, and this principle was one of the reasons Australia championed a UN Security Council resolution on policing during our term on the Security Council from 2013 to 2014. And we'll continue to play a leading role in international police training and in promoting the further development of policing within the UN's peacekeeping policies. And in doing so, we draw on considerable experience within the UN system, including 53 years of continuous policing service in Cyprus, which concluded in June this year. Third, Australia has helped drive the UN's agenda on women, peace and security, and this is a particular interest and passion of mine, having witnessed the contribution that women can make, particularly in the Solomon Islands. Australia helped bring an unprecedented level of attention to this issue during our Security Council term, culminating in resolutions to improve women's participation in conflict prevention and peace building. Conflict prevention, peacekeeping and peace building and our approach to maintaining security and stability have evolved over the last 70 years and will continue to adapt. In fact, next week I will be leading Australia's delegation to the UN General Assembly Leaders Week, and I will participate in the UN Security Council high-level debate on US peacekeeping. The focus is on reform, where I'll be highlighting our perspectives and given our experience, particularly that peacekeeping must be deployed as part of a broader political strategy where the work of peacekeepers is supported by other tools like mediation, humanitarian support and longer-term development planning. Today, our region faces a range of new challenges, including another watershed. The international community must find a way to walk North Korea back from the brink of its reckless provocations and illegal missile and nuclear programs. And again this morning, another missile test over Japan, which, while probably intermediate in its range, travelled further than any of its previous 88 illegal missile tests. As these walls remind us, 340 Australians lost their lives in military conflict on the Korean Peninsula. The current situation is difficult and dangerous and threatens the stability of our region. Successive Security Council resolutions have focused the world's attention on this issue, and the Security Council has resolved repeatedly that North Korea's nuclear program is illegal, and the members are united in condemning and sanctioning the regime's nuclear and missile tests. The sanctions agreed last Monday, together with the sanctions agreed on the 5th of August, are the toughest and most comprehensive package of sanctions imposed on North Korea to date, but they must be universally implemented in order to put sufficient pressure on North Korea for it to change its behaviour and to recalculate its risk. And North Korea is in direct and continued defiance of the UN Security Council. All members of the Security Council, particularly the Permanent Five, who have a privileged position as permanent members, must uphold the authority of the Security Council and enforce fully its resolutions. Australia, of course, will continue to strictly enforce these sanctions and reinforce them with autonomous measures that we have also put in place. I have repeatedly called on North Korea to cease its illegal programs, together with other counterpart foreign ministers and leaders, and to focus its efforts and energy and resources to the well-being of its impoverished people. Justice Michael Kirby, the Australian Chief of the UN Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in North Korea, exposed the regime's abuses in his official report to the UN that concluded North Korea is, and I quote, a state that does not content itself with ensuring the authoritarian rule of a small group of people, but seeks to dominate every aspect of its citizens' lives and terrorises them from within. There's little disagreement around the world about how this situation should end. One way or another, North Korea must abandon its illegal missile and weapons programs. The United Nations will continue to be the important forum for achieving this. One of the key messages of the Australian Government's foreign policy white paper that will be published in coming months is that in an increasingly contested world, the rules-based international order is vital for the pursuit of every nation's legitimate international interests. The United Nations, with all its successes and all its imperfections, sits at the heart of this international order. I believe Australia is a principled and pragmatic member of the United Nations, making concerted contributions which we think will yield the best results. And I'm delighted that we have an opportunity, should all those who have promised us support vote in our favour, to serve on the UN Human Rights Council from October this year. We'll continue to support the institution of the United Nations to strengthen the rules-based order, project our values and interests, and solve problems that require the United Nations' unique legitimacy. Peacekeeping is a tangible expression of the international rules-based order. I salute all Australians and others around the world who are and have been dedicated peacekeepers to achieve that noble end. Thank you.
Minister, thank you so much for that great speech. I think as a keynote address for this conference, it's just perfect. And I know you wanted to stay to watch some of the other presentations, but strangely, you're in such demand you have to go back to give another presentation, and they've adjusted it. So please accept this on our behalf, and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I wish you all the best for the rest of
the year. Thank you.
Just on good afternoon. It's a hard act to follow. My name is Zeny Edwards, and I'm the director of the UNAA Peace Program. And I'm very glad and privileged to be here to participate in this forum. So thank you very much for asking me. Most of the Australians' public attention has focused on critical military contributions, but there are other services, humanitarian services, provided by organizations and private companies, such as Aspen Medical, that work in positions of influence and danger with their efforts largely unknown. This will be the subject of our next speaker. Bruce Armstrong started his working career in the Australian Army. In April 2013, Bruce joined Aspen Medical as the Chief of Staff. In January 2015, he was appointed as the Chief Executive Officer for the global operation spanning 12 countries and employing in excess of 2,000 employees. Aspen Medical is one of those very enterprising companies that do good without most people knowing what they're doing. So Bruce is going to speak about Aspen Medical being chosen to help rebuild Mosul's healthcare system as part of the global humanitarian effort in partnership with the World Health Organization. So please welcome Bruce Armstrong.
Thank you very much for those kind words. You know, when you get asked to speak, I always go directly and have a look at the program. You think, I don't want to be the last speaker of the day just before drinks, and I don't want to follow a great speaker. Well, I wasn't the last speaker before drinks, but unfortunately for me, I had to follow Minister Bishop. And in her absence, can I just also just thank her for her fantastic leadership on the world stage on behalf of Aspen Medical. To those here, to General Smith, still outside, I think, but also to the ambassadors, if they're still here, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to come here today and just to tell you about a story. I want to tell you a story about an Australian company, about where we've come from, and then I really want to spend most of my time telling you about what we're doing in Iraq at the moment in support of the UN and the World Health Organization. And then finally, I just want to contribute to the dialogue on the utilisation of the private sector in UN operations and defence operations around the world. I'll just... sorry, there we go. All right, just a bit about us. Well, really, we're a diversified health service provider, and we were founded in 2003. The thing I really want to tell you about is that we are a very proud Australian company, and our global head office is here in Canberra, just over at Deakin. And you heard that we do employ circa 2,000, that goes up and down. The other thing about Aspen Medical is defence is in our DNA. We have the two founders came from the Defence Force. I've spent time in the Defence Force. I'm a veteran myself, and also a lot of our executive. But now we're delivering health services around the world. So you can see up there that not only do we support the UN, but we support a number of governments around the world and other agencies. You can see our area of operations. We really started, we started overseas in the UK, but in the main we started here, and our first mission was mentioned by the Minister, was Regional Assistance Mission Solomon Islands, and we were there right from the start when that mission first started in support of the Australian Defence Force, providing primary healthcare, tertiary healthcare, and also aeromedical evacuation medical support. So this is really why I'm here today, to tell you about what we're doing in Iraq at the moment. And I want to make this a personal story, so there's a very short video that I want to show you at one stage, and I want to show you that because you'll hear directly from some of our people on the ground and on the magnificent work that they're doing and that we're so proud of. And it's an international team. I'll give you some stats. Predominantly it's Australian, but we're also working with the Iraq Ministry of Health staff. All the ones certainly that I met were out of Mosul, and the fantastic work that they're doing, and I'm personally proud of every one of them, the staff that we have over there, including the Iraqi staff. Just a bit of geography, and look, most people in this room, I'm sure, are well and truly across where Iraq is. But if I can just take you down to our area of operations for our support for the UN, We're in northern Iraq, and the two centres that I'd point out on that map is Mosul and Erbil. Mosul is really where we're predominantly providing the services that we are to the World Health Organisation and the UN, and I'll give you a breakdown of what that is actually about. And Erbil is where we're staging through all of our people, and we have our operational project management office there. And for those who have been there lately, Kurdistan, I'd call it reasonably benign and relatively secure, although you've still got people with AK-47s on the front of your hotel, but quite a secure area for us to bring our people through and then transition them out of Kurdistan over the border and then into the Mosul vicinity. Most people, once again, this was received a lot of media, and so we saw the terrible, tragic circumstances of what was going on in that city. And from first-hand experience, we know how terrible they are now. And I'll talk about how we're trying to take care of our people who have been involved in this. So what did we get asked to provide? So we were asked to provide by the World Health Organisation a trauma hospital, 2 trauma hospitals as it ended up being. And for the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, we were asked to provide 2 maternity hospitals. The World Health Organisation trauma hospitals are the primary structures, and I'll show you some footage of those. And we blistered on the side the UNFPA maternity hospitals. So the facilities. It was really manned by International, but it was run here, and the strategic, and I'll go into this. The strategic office that is running this is just over there at Deakin. So that's where it all started. That's where all the planning started. That's where all the risk assessment was done, and that's where the operation was launched from over there. But on the ground in the country, we've currently got 2 hospitals. The first hospital at Atbar, just south on the main supply route that was going into the conflict area, was opened on the 24th of March. I'll speak a little bit more later on, but a large part of what we were doing was capacity building. I'm really pleased to say that we've now handed over Hospital 1 back to the Iraq Ministry of Health, and they're running it completely themselves. And Hospital 2 is very much still running to near full capacity, and that was opened on the 23rd of April. We were supposed to open another hospital at Tel Afar, and that was cancelled, and I'm really pleased to hear that because it was secured a lot quicker than they thought. We're currently doing planning for another 2 hospitals north of Baghdad and south of the current area of operations, and we expect to have our first hospital opened in that vicinity over the next week or so. So you can see some patient statistics there. These are in the main civilians, but I'd highlight that we treated ISIS suspects. We treated also Iraqi military personnel as well. But in the main, we were there, and that's what we did treat. We treated the civilian casualties. 8,990. I'm pretty sure if I asked today, we'd be up just over 9,000. So it's a lot of people that were coming through a trauma hospital. And the age, there was a large spread of age there. Look, that picture there is a fantastic picture. That's the first patient that we saw. As says, that was a small baby boy suffering crush injuries. I think the thing I look at that, and that's one of our Kurdish security force staff coming in, holding up the aid there, and that is a Sunni lady carrying in the baby. Now, I'm pleased to say that young boy survived, so very happy about that. The injuries we were seeing there could only be described as horrific. ISIS was shooting men, women, children, babies, pregnant women, and they were all coming through our hospital. So predominantly we were seeing blast injuries, we're seeing blast, gunshot wounds, crush injuries, and there was a very small amount of chemical at one stage. I just wanted to show this very short video because it brings it personal, and you'll hear from some of our people on the ground, including an Australian.
has drawn from its experience in West Africa during the Ebola outbreak to put together another humanitarian team.
Up at Athbar Field Hospital we have a trauma centre, so it's predominantly trauma that's coming through the doors. We're seeing a lot of burns, a lot of traumatic amputations, a lot of blast injuries, a lot of gunshot wounds. Really we're it in terms of the care that's available in and around Mosul at the moment.
Yeah, got woken up at about 3:30 this morning for a call for 3 non-critical patients coming in. Then got a call again at 4 o'clock to turn up, and we've had around about 20 patients through all of a sudden with blast injuries, etc. So we've just tried to manage a mass casualty.
Basically what we have here is a 7-year-old Iraqi national who was involved in an airstrike about 6-7 months ago. She had an open fracture of the midshaft of her left femur, which was treated surgically in Baghdad. And our plan today is to take this external fixator off. It's been on for 7 months, and so hopefully we'll take the frame off and the fracture will be stable, and we can then take the pins out. That went very smoothly. You see, there was a lot of staff there, but I think it was a very straightforward operation. She'll get home today, and for the first time in 7 months, she won't have a big fixator on her leg. So it will change her life.
Can he come into ICU? Yes, when she wakes, eh?
داخل العناية شوي أما تقعد نطلع إن شاء الله. إن شاء الله.
Okay. Very good. Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Isam.
Thank you.
very, very great challenge was, bringing two teams together, an international team with an Iraqi team, and the Iraqi team being an integrated part of our system. It has come out very well. It has been a fantastic experience. We have become one team. We have achieved to build two hospitals. Yeah, they are the largest hospitals in the areas, the largest trauma units, with the highest standard. Yeah, and we never have done that before. Aspen never has done that before. But we have done a marvelous job. We make a real difference here in survival of patients. Our mortality rates are lower than everybody or anybody expected it to be. It's less than 4% of all patients coming to us that will unfortunately die. So I think we do make a big difference and we have a big impact.
Thank you for your time there. As I said, I think it's really important to hear from the people that are on the ground delivering what I think is a magnificent effort. And that was really in the international team that you saw there, predominantly Australians, but the last doctor that you saw there, Marcus, who's our Senior Medical Officer, worked for Aspen Medical long term and has just done a magnificent job in bringing the Iraqi and the international expat team together as he said, one team, which is what I saw when I was over there. I just was going to show you some footage, some clips of the actual hospitals. They were a very high standard. Great photo. That was the first baby born in our first maternity hospital. That caused joy all around the world at Aspen Medical. I love that photo. Because they've all got our caps on, but it's showing in amongst the Iraqi clinical staff is all of our Aspen staff as well. So a great photo. So look, just a bit about the project management. So as I said, this was our strategic headquarters just over here at Deakin. The operational headquarters we set up in Erbil, and of course the tactical sites were out at the hospitals themselves. Over in the UAE at Abu Dhabi, that's where we had our support hub, and we transitioned everyone from around the world in through there, and that's when they did their onboarding, things like mental health, but also just all of the other things and security knowledge that they had to have before going into country. The expat team, it was about, that was at the last, there was about 36% were Australians, and the next biggest contingent was British. There was about 20%, but then it really was right around the world after that, and you saw our SMO was from Germany. So we're always proud of how quickly we can stand things up when we need to, and we showed that in West Africa. But I'll just show you from here. So last year, the World Health Organization went out to the EU and asked for responses to provide these trauma hospitals because they'd done their planning and they knew that there was going to be a large amount of civilian casualties out of the Mosul offensive, and they didn't get a response. Now, to put that in context, though, Médecins Sans Frontières and the Red Crescent, Samaritan's Purse, etc., they were all on the ground already. And so it wasn't like they weren't doing anything. We at Aspen Medical have huge respect for all of those NGOs, and we think we all play a part. But there was no capacity, and so when they eventually sorted this out, that we got literally the late night phone call, it was in February, came through to us and said, well, can you put a hospital, a trauma hospital and a maternity hospital into Iraq? Now, we don't say yes straight away to those things. We need to do all of our planning, so our risk assessment, etc. But, and our first thing that we did do before we had said yes was we sent our recon team into Erbil, and we had them there within literally days. We sent someone out of the UAE straight in there. And then it was pretty quick after that we had the hospitals open, and that there, when we transitioned back to the Iraq Ministry of Health on the Hospital 1, that was a great moment as well because we'd done our job in our capacity building, and we're estimated, as I said, to open another hospital in the next week or so. I'd just like to finish by just making some comments about private sector utilisation, because I know this is a sensitive issue not only for the UN but for the World Health Organization, part of the UN, and also for a number of governments. So just by way of background, I believe there's a proof point here, and the proof point is that Aspen Medical has deployed on a number of missions, be they defence, so we were on Regional Assistance Mission Solomon Islands right at the start, and right through competitive tenders we stayed there until it just closed, as the Minister said, in June. So there's plenty of examples of the private sector being part of a community that is going to deliver on a nation's objectives, whether they be humanitarian or whether they be security-based. And we're finding actually that the governments are increasingly turning to the private sector as part of their capability, whether it is part of the national capability or whether it's because they want to, in the case of Minister Bishop in Australia, they want to generate an economy around having private sector delivering aid. And of course, we're seeing from the aid and humanitarian bodies that they also recognise the value of having private sector involvement in creating increased value when we deploy into the country. There's some examples that I spoke about before of where Aspen Medical has been and who we've supported around the world. And that's the statement from the Australian government that was under Minister Bishop, and then so they've certainly been engaging with private industry because they see that there is mutual benefit for all parties, not only our own government but also for the communities that we're being sent into. So I'm just going to finish with why private industry and because I think this contributes to the dialogue that's happening both in the UN and certainly I've just got back from New York a couple of months back that I visited there, and I'm trying to promote this dialogue not only with the UN but also with other governments. And we're doing that also right in Iraq with governments approaching us. They've heard about what we're doing, and not only the Australian government but other European governments taking part in this dialogue. Well, why private industry? We would say because often, not always, we would have a regional presence, and that's advantageous. Sustainability, we are for profit and we don't resolve from that, but we would always say at Aspen Medical we put the patient first, but we can, because we're for profit, we can sustain. So in West Africa during the Ebola crisis, we were engaged by the US government. We did about 50% of their response, and we were engaged by the Australian and the New Zealand governments to do their response into Sierra Leone. And then when it started dropping off and the NGOs were leaving, the UK government engaged us to take over from NGOs that had been providing their response. So we can give that sustainability. We can do that often in a more efficient way. Certainly for the Australian government on the West Africa deployment, we came in 25% under their budget. We're currently around 20% under the UN's budget in Iraq. And we bring the innovation that we deliver to all of our clients, our private clients around the world, we bring that to what we're doing. And finally, and one that I am particularly proud of what we've done in Iraq, we do that capacity building. And I think we leave a lasting legacy that will stay in that country long after we've left. So, look, in conclusion, there are multiple examples, I believe, of how private industry has been able to contribute to not only the UN but other civil governments and what they do around the world. And the private sector is well placed to do that. And finally, and the primary reason I'm here is to talk about what we did in Iraq. Up to now, I'm very happy that we've met the objectives that we've been given by the UN and the World Health Organization. Thank you very much for listening to our story. I don't know if there's time for questions. No, sounds like I'm out of time. Thank you very much.
I'm sure a lot of people will have questions. I have a lot of questions, Bruce. The recruitment process, for example, and there was a statement there to say after they've been treated, they're sent home. Where is home? I mean, is there a home to go home to? Considering there's 1.2 million people in Mosul, you've got a 48-bed hospital. Your video was very powerful. So thank you very much, Bruce, for your speech and your presentation. I think I will leave it to Matthew to close the day before lunch.
Thanks, Zeny. Thanks, Zeny. Yes, that's right. Thank you, Bruce. So it is lunch now. If you do have questions for Bruce, you'll have the next little period of time outside to do that. We'll resume at 1:30. Please eat and be merry.